getting your doctorate during COVID? Because I know there's been a lot of talk around how stay-at-home orders and just general safety precautions have allowed us to be more productive. So, and that's not always the case. So for you guys specifically, I want you to just kind of talk about how it may have affected your productivity, either positively or negatively, or everything in between.
Okay. So for me, when COVID hit, I was basically deep into my analyses and my write-up for my dissertation. And I was doing secondary data analysis. So for me, locality really didn't matter. I could do it from any place. So I was at home and working on my dissertation without really too much of any impediments. I didn't have to go out and collect data. So I was fortunate in that sense. So my defense also, I would say, was a positive experience for me. Because I think having a virtual defense, at least for me, I think it lessened a lot of the anxiety that I would have had if I were in person, if we were all together in one room and in person together. So, and it was also very convenient because I was in my own home and I was very comfortable. So I did find that very positive. We did have a few little glitches in terms of the technology. At certain times, one or another of my committee members would break up and we couldn't hear what they were saying, so we had to back up and start over again. But really, it wasn't much of an impediment for me. So if anything could be positive about the experience, that being in that situation, wasn't a barrier for me at the time. So
and you have teenagers, right?
Yes.
Did that help?
Well, so it's very important when you're working from home and you have kids and you have dogs to have a quiet place to work, obviously. I really didn't. So that was a bit of a challenge for me. I was kind of right in the main thoroughfare of the house. And so I had people coming in and coming out and kind of forgetting that I was kind of in the middle of trying to concentrate, or when I was defending my dissertation, I was terrified somebody was going to burst in on me. But other than that, it wasn't a terrible problem. I will say, though, it's definitely a good idea to have a nice, quiet, private place to work. So if you have that, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, and I would think maybe because they were older, it was probably a little helpful that they could be on their own and you didn't have to worry too much about what was going on.
Absolutely. Yes, that's absolutely true. Yes, I didn't have, little children wandering around and getting, out of the care, because of my husband was home, so he was there to sort of help corral people. But, they're more self-sufficient, so they could keep themselves from interrupting much more than little people could. So, yes, definitely easier with older kids.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
I have a kid at 5 when the COVID started. So I think I'm kind of lucky because I finished collecting my data right before the lockdown. So which means I don't need to meet clients. I don't have the problems to collect my data. So, and then I have more time to just do the transcription, which I'm supposed to do. But the negative part is because I have a kid at 5 and all the school lockdown closed. So at least half of time I have to be with my kid, like do a lot of things to occupy her and kind of redirect her, say mommy is doing my paper. So which means I'm very far away from my original plan, because our original plan graduate in August, maybe summertime, I can finish my at least my draft. So it's far away. But I think the positive parts of working from home is the main time the professors has more time. My advisor has more time, so she can meet me more than I can expect it, which means she gave me a lot of directions and guidance during the pandemic time, like especially just started, everything kind of just shut down. So I really appreciate that time. And now and long term is not really a problem for me because I already moved out. I finished all my classes way before this time, so always work from home.
Yeah.
And now the kids back to school, and then I try to focus more on my dissertation to finish my finding parts and start my discussion parts. In general, it's positive, I would say.
I guess for me, it was definitely a time of increased productivity. I've pretty much worked the entire time, and working in education. Even when we were on lockdown, so to speak, work continued, but just having a little more flexible time. I totally agree with Regine that I found that committee members and my advisor was much more accessible, which was very helpful during that window of time. And it really helped me to move along. I think one thing I would add to this discussion, the COVID piece in terms of adjusting like my research protocol and things like that, I was further along in that. But what I think that was advantageous for me was the fact that I could now include future research that, or ideas for future research that spoke to the current dynamic. For my research, which is family support and with youth at an age where education is so important, I could talk about the way that the role has shifted in K-12 education and the importance of like understanding the dynamic for families now that they are the primary sources of education day in and day out. So it's bigger than just sending their children to an institution, having a relationship with that institution. Now they have been the providers of the technology. They've had to learn a lot more about the curriculum. They've had to learn about simple procedures such as like, how do their students get marked present and absent? How do they submit their assignments? Like things that they shouldn't have had to really worry about as much in an in-person world are things that now have become paramount. So I think it paved the way for me to understand what life after dissertation can look like, what my research should shift to, but also give me the opportunity to place that in my dissertation and have it published, so to speak. So that's been very helpful.
Yeah. I'm just thinking through who is collecting what kind of data, because Cam and Melissa, you guys are both using secondary data for the most part, right? And then Rishing and Julie, you guys are using interviews. So that is a much more face-to-face data collection. And Rishing, you just finished before COVID, and Julie, you're in the middle of it, right? And then Monera, you're working on putting your surveys together, so it wouldn't be maybe not too impacted. But Julie, do you want to talk a little bit about how COVID has maybe impacted your productivity? Because I know you are working in the recruitment side of things, can be tough in the middle of COVID.
Actually, I guess I want to say I've been pretty lucky in that because I have to do all my interviews on Zoom, and gaining institutional review board or IRB approval did take a little bit longer because I think we had to make sure we had a lot, everything was secure. But because all my interviews are on Zoom, I have dads right now that are almost spanning, I could have anybody from even another country if I wanted. So that is kind of nice. Right now I have a dad from Atlanta, Georgia, one from New York City, one from Niagara Falls, and one from Rochester. And so we've been meeting on Zoom, and I think it may be even a little bit easier to meet on Zoom. I'm also sort of lucky and sort of interesting maybe that all my dads are work from home. So it makes it easier for them to meet. And I also, on Zoom, we see each other very clearly. And so they can see my face, I can see their face, and it's recorded, which is also nice because that's something I may not have been able to have if I didn't in person, where I would have had to try to remember all that. Now it's recorded and it's there until my study is done, so I can actually see.
And perhaps you're even getting a little more because you're getting all of those facial expressions and gestures, as I.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been nice. I feel very happy that I don't have to take my last few courses online, because for me, online is, I mean, it's great, but it's not the same as in person, and having the teacher right there and being able to say, you know, in between breaks, can I talk to you? That kind of stuff. So I guess we kind of, where we are right now, we were all pretty fortunate that our in-person classes were over.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're pretty independent, and this group has been a great support. So we're not totally isolated.
Yeah.
I think it would be much more difficult for those who don't have this peer support like we do have.
Yeah. And really, I would say, Julie and Melissa, you guys are the only ones that are still in Rochester. So the rest of us, or no, I'm sorry, Cam, you're also in Rochester.
Yes.
Yes, my apologies. But so the three of so Raching and I and Munira had all moved away prior to COVID. So we were already practicing this online only experience. And I think that was something that was sort of a nice thing for me. I don't know about you guys, but to be able to just jump online and see all of us was actually part of a regular, predictable thing that I like to see. Some nice routines, a reconnection, resets.
I would agree with that, because since I moved 2016 away from Rochester, it's kind of, I kind of felt isolated because I'm not in campus. I can't have access to professors, to the students. So I feel like I have more accessibility to people through Zoom, because everyone now is using Zoom. But I want to also touch on the productivity of writing your proposal during COVID. At the beginning, it was kind of fun because, in lockdown, everyone, just focusing on what they have to do. And mentally, it's going to be 2 months, 3 months, and then this all going to be over. So that was fun. But sooner or later, this COVID lockdown and I think with all of the things that have been happening in the country and the changes and uncertainties is get to you in a way. But also while you're writing, a lot of your writing had to be changed and adapted to the new circumstances that is happening. So I wrote most of my proposal before COVID, but now that I'm getting ready to collect my data, I have also to consider, if I'm going to ask a question, does that, something impact them pre-COVID or during COVID, and how that would influence my results.
And so did you end up adding any COVID specific questions?
I did add 2 questions. So it's a survey, and I have to make sure that when they answer, for example, questions about their identity exploration, was that, their future plan wasn't changed pre-COVID, or do they feel like, their view for the future shifted after, all of this thing happened. Yeah. So it had to be considered while you're writing.
So in a way, that was actually, you did have some nice timing there to be able to add those questions, because Raching and Julie, you guys were both finished with your proposal prior to COVID. So anything that you had everything was already approved at that point. So that's actually kind of interesting.